And at those moments, our tendency out of our level 3 ego is to turn on ourselves and see it as confirmation as to why we should have lacked any trust in ourselves or life or God in the first place. But the whole point, perhaps, of life is to learn that those are the moments when we're invited into a new beginning through investigating what matters more than what we thought mattered, and expanding our perspective and our perception and even our identity to a larger atmosphere of a new covenant with life, that we need to reprioritize what really matters in life.
I look at all this now, and I'm a person of faith, and I spend time in the Bible, and I read things, and I read this morning, forgetting what lies behind and pressing forward towards the goal. And that's how I'm living my life today. It's not that I forget anything throughout what I've been through or the past, but it's actually quite irrelevant as it relates to my life and where I sit today on July 11th of 2024. If I'm so lucky and blessed to have more years, it's looking forward as to what can my soul, my life, my impact have on other people. And what comes with that, Al, I think, is humility. Stacy Harding and Al Killeen with another episode of Fourth Level Conversations. We're excited to be with you today. Good morning, Al.
Good morning, brother. How are you?
I'm just outstanding. How are you doing? It's going to be very hot here today, but other than that, just great.
How hot is it going to be?
Triple digits. First time this year in Colorado, I think, at 100. And it's supposed to run up to 105 through like Monday of next week.
Well, this is when you're grateful for the low humidity, because we're in Tennessee and it's only 90-ish here, but with 90% humidity, our heat index is like 110. So
Yeah.
it's all just a matter of, and it sets us up beautifully for the topic today, I think, which came to me this morning, and particularly with some insights about you, which is the importance of learning adaptability to unexpected circumstances. Brother, you and I have a long background in the mortgage industry, and we've spent decades and decades, I think 47 years for me and probably 40 or something for you,
Right.
where, we were used to a pattern of the way things worked, and that has changed dramatically and probably permanently due to just economics of society. And what we're seeing are a lot of our friends that we worked with that are scrambling and struggling and trying to figure out how to navigate this without that initial tendency we have for fear and paralysis and sort of our survival instinct jumping in. So I was in the shower this morning, and I was actually thinking about you, Stace, because I was thinking about what I know of your life journey. And you and I have known of each other for decades, but only really gotten to know each other in the last year. And I realized what a teacher you are for humanity, and really what an unrecognized saintly character you are that you'll have trouble accepting probably. But here's my story about you. You're a guy, to my knowledge, who had this tremendously successful long career in mortgage lending at the top of the house of a major mortgage company you helped build, and you helped create great growth for that organization, and you were there for a long time, and you did very well while you were there. And then through various circumstances that ended. You went to another competitor where you were there for probably a little over a year, and then that didn't work out, and now you find yourself later in life divorced with a change of your career. And most people in that circumstance would turn on themselves and find a way to make that all about their story in their head that we all have as a trunk of evidence as to why I failed and I was a fraud and blah, 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 all the things we tend to harshly say about ourselves. But I think one of the things that you've shown me, and I think other people who know you, is that there's an alternative higher option for how to adapt to life circumstances that present us with the invitation to fear, suffering, paralysis, and self denigration. And that is to develop the ability to expand our perspective to a larger atmosphere. And what I've learned watching how you've beautifully adapted to the new reality of your life is that you've decided to operate as your level 4 values in the face of this invitation to level 3 ego fear, and to essentially see what it is that God, the source, the universe, divinity, the creator, is offering you as an opportunity for growth, learning, expansion, and a new direction that can provide a new beginning that I believe is going to bring you to a level of fulfillment that you've never known in life. And ironically, through circumstances that aren't as predictable, comfortable, and habituated as your past circumstances. So I wanted us to talk today in the podcast about this situation that everyone is going to face in life, where maybe you have a child get ill and die. Maybe you have a spouse die. Maybe you get divorced. Maybe you develop a health problem. Maybe you get fired, as I did 25 years ago when I thought life was over. And at those moments, our tendency out of our level 3 ego is to turn on ourselves and see it as confirmation as to why we should have lacked any trust in ourselves or life or God in the first place. But the whole point, perhaps, of life is to learn that those are the moments when we're invited into a new beginning through investigating what matters more than what we thought mattered, and expanding our perspective and our perception and even our identity to a larger atmosphere of a new covenant with life, that we need to reprioritize what really matters in life, and that we're going to be okay. We're going to eat, and we're going to have a roof over our heads, and we're going to be able to be warm, safe, and dry eventually. And now we have the possibility of a place we can get to that's even more inspirational and fulfilling than what we thought we had with perceived security. So today's podcast for me is to honor you, Stacy, and as somebody who is, I think, a quiet saint who probably doesn't recognize it in himself, but I stand in awe and inspired in my hopes that I can only have the courage and the faith and the scope of mind that you have shown through a series of very adverse circumstances. And I'm really honored to have this discussion with you in front of anybody who's watching this podcast as an invitation for them to hear what we're going to talk about. So when they encounter those moments in their lives, they can perhaps remember this podcast and find the courage to see that this is an ending of one thing, but a beginning of something far greater. And the key to unlocking that will be having the courage to expand yourself, your perspective, and your relationship with what matters in life and your faith. So that's my setup for our discussion today. What do you think of all that, brother?
Wow, Al. Well, I think about all the things that you were talking about, and certainly we all have our own story, and I have that experience over the last few years of the things you mentioned, but it's not unique to me. People go through things in their lives. We maybe have these seasons of calm waters, so to speak, but there's always a storm coming and brewing somewhere. And I think about a couple of folks that I've heard of this week. One of our former colleagues in the mortgage industry at the age of 52, massive heart attack, and is no longer here just a week ago. A
Wow.
college friend of mine, a female college friend of mine, one of the sweetest human beings on earth, passed away at the age of 61.
Wow.
And so there's just the storms come. And when I think about those two circumstances, I think about their families and what they're going through. And so we have calm waters at times, but then there's also these inevitable adversarial, controversial, what we might deem to be bad things that happen to us in life. And I think about the last 5 years for me and going through a divorce, disappointing my children, having a change after 24 years of my professional career with a team I thought I would retire from forever when I was, ripe old age of can't work anymore, and didn't happen. And going through all that, I certainly had lots of times of despair and doubt in myself. And, sometimes when we start doubting ourselves, in order to survive, we deflect it and start blaming others, right? So then I can start to blame my ex-wife. I can blame my children for not understanding. I can blame my previous employers for changing. How dare they? And what I'm learning, and what I think I've learned the most, is this is an adventure, this life. It's a journey. And there's very little that I actually control in this world other than the lens that I see things through and how my mind reacts to what I see. And I've got a personal responsibility to, I think, God, first of all, to do that at the highest level I possibly can. So you and I would call that level 4 behavior, thinking, attitude, soul, all those things, where we're thinking of the fact that we're part of a much larger story that is unfolding and will unfold well beyond the time that we're walking on this earth. But we have this opportunity while we're here to impact people's lives and help them perhaps change the lens through which they maybe see themselves and the circumstances that have occurred to them. And so I look at all this now, and I'm a person of faith, and I spend time in the Bible, and I read things, and I read this morning, forgetting what lies behind and pressing forward towards the goal. And that's how I'm living my life today. Is it's not that I forget anything throughout what I've been through or the past, but it's actually quite irrelevant as it relates to my life and where I sit today on July 11th of 2024. If I'm so lucky and blessed to have more years, it's looking forward as to what can my soul, my life, my impact have on other people. And what comes with that, Al, I think, is humility. And it creates a place where you don't discount the value of who you are as a human being, but you don't think you're all that big either. And so you have an opportunity to kind of set aside your own personal desires, needs, goals, and so forth, realizing that that's all in God's hands. Because there's not been a time in my life where I've gone through any adversity where He didn't see me through that and into a better experience. And that's my belief. I understand there are people watching that may not share that, and it's okay. Whatever it is that causes faith for you is really what I'm driving at. And so I look at this now, and I'm probably embracing change maybe for the first time in my life, where I'm like, hey, this is going to be interesting. I wonder how this is going to turn out. And what it does is it creates an opportunity for me to kind of just release all those expectations that I had of how perfect my life would work out, and how it hasn't. So there must be something wrong with me, or, God isn't really a loving God after all. And so maybe it's just all, something that I was imagining, but it's not that. And so I can look at things that have happened, and you're always so kind to say nice things about me. But Al, if I hadn't gone through those things, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today, because my arrogance would still be, oh, I've got it all together. What do I need to talk to Al Killeen for? It's crazy. And, when all those things were happening, you were the first phone call I made, because I had this soul connection to you, even though we didn't know each other very well. I knew that you had a mind that operated at a level beyond what this world projects as success. And, just watch the politics going on right now. I mean, it's so disgusting. I mean, talk about immature children at every level. I was thinking about this the other day. I was watching one of the broadcasts and one of the political shows, and it was also negative. I thought, I would hate to have that job. My job today would be all day long to tear other human beings down and what they're saying, doing, not doing. And then I go home and I'm supposed to be a positive influence on my family and spouse and all those other things. I don't know how you could do it, because there's no, at least in my opinion, there's nothing going on that national stage that is about the good for other people. It's all personal agendas or organizational agendas. And there's things that obviously have to be decided on and all that. And that's what we get to do in this great country. But I just don't want to live that way. I don't want to live on this platform of negativity about myself and others. And you've helped me do all that. So I'll let you expand on that. But I'm grateful, Al. I am grateful for the adversity that I'm going through or have gone through, because I think I'm beyond most of that. But I'm grateful for it because it's opened my eyes in a way I wouldn't otherwise have seen.
It'd be a good title of one of the books you should write is Grateful for the Adversity. Um, what comes to mind as you're speaking is if you think about Darwin's theory of evolution, and whether one believes in that or not isn't the point. It's really about his observations about nature that, in his opinion and theory, what actually moves forward and becomes something anew is that which can adapt to circumstances. Really, what the whole premise of the theory of evolution is, as I understand it, is that creatures who adapt, not by their design, by genetic aberrance, I would say, that suddenly realize the weather, the nature around them, the heat, the cold, the dry, the warm, the wet, has all occurred now. And for those that don't adapt, they die. But for that small percentage that somehow have an advantage, the hummingbird that over time develops a longer and longer beak to be able to reach down to the flowers and get the food, those hummingbirds tend to proliferate and live, and the short-beaked hummingbirds don't. If we think of that principle of adaptation, it becomes something that's more than over eons and millions of years that animals may do to become higher form animals. It's really a subtle principle within the life that we live every day, is that life is rarely what we expect it to be. And we tend to want to have it be predictable out of a sense of survival and security so that we can at least momentarily stop and rest and not have to be afraid. I think the ego lives intrinsically in fear for its own survival, and as a result is always looking for the boogeyman. And as a result, it tends to want to create this artifice that life is a stagnant, predictable thing where tomorrow is going to be reflected by yesterday. And that never happens over time for anybody or any circumstance or any animal or any plant. It all is constantly changing. And that's all by design. Why is that the case? I think it's because it gives us the opportunity to not get too stagnant and calcified in our old way of thinking. It's a constant invitation to growth. And the whole key to whether or not we can uh, adapt and end up having something turn out better than the past is the courage to accept the reality that what was is no longer, and that now I have a new path to go forward. One of the things that you have done that has been, again, so inspirational and such a teaching to me personally, and I think to a lot of people who know you, is that you have decided that when you weren't sure what was going to happen next with your economics or with your relationships or whatever, you decided to be honorable to the marriage that you had for so long, and to continue to honor taking care of your ex-wife per the court's instructions, but also per your own internal integrity that required of you to stand for a higher principle of a woman that you made children with and that you loved, and I would offer still love, even though your marriage isn't in place, and she may have a different perception of it. In a way, that's none of your business in your mind, in my opinion, because your integrity requires you to do the right thing, even if it's not understood, even if your children understand and they're mad at you, and your ex-wife has a story about you. None of that is your business. What is your business is that you've got to live with you, and you've got to live with the idea that you're operating in the flow of God as you understand God to the best of your ability. And in the end, we all have to get to that place if we're to ever find some sense of meaning in life and self-acceptance. And I'm sorry to hear about people who have passed, but that's a warning shot that we can't wait for this moment to happen. I hope people listening to this podcast realize, well, that this has nothing to do with me because I'm warm, safe, and dry, and I've got this family, and I've got this job, whatever. Yeah, you do for now, but I guarantee you aren't going to have it forever, or maybe even not that much longer. So what you and I are talking about is a deeper skill set in life that has us explore who we're going to be when everything that we expect is going to be the same tomorrow is no longer here. Maybe I find out I have terminal lung cancer and 3 weeks left to live. Maybe my wife tells me she wants a divorce and she no longer loves me. Maybe my children have something horrible happen to them. It's going to happen to all of us eventually. So I would offer that the very key to life is this sort of evolutionary adaptation of our perspective and our ability to have a relationship with faith and with that deeper place within us that we can go to when life doesn't make sense. I've certainly had my own many experiences over a long life where I went through my own moments of the dark night of the soul. And you know what I found in those moments, and I'd love to hear what your checklist is of how you did what you did for people that are going to need to do it, and maybe need to do it at this moment, like a lot of our brothers and sisters in mortgage lending. But what I realized, the very first important thing that I had to do before I could get to faith, before I could get to new possibilities, was I had to simply pause. I had to not react out of my immediate temptation to react out of my survival instinct when circumstances change. So I would offer, in my opinion and experience anyway, the very first critical step in making an opportunity out of an adversity is to pause and not accept the story in your mind, which is likely out of your ego and its survival response, that I have to do something to react. Actually, what is typically the case is you should wait and you should give it time, maybe an hour, maybe a day, maybe a week, maybe a year. And if you do, what I've found as a pattern over and over in my life is that somebody or something will come into your life that will introduce new information, new perspectives, new options, new opportunities that you can then look at as a fresh beginning. And perhaps that is built into the perfection of the human experience, so that we don't get calcified and settled into the illusion of control or the illusion of permanence in an intrinsically impermanent world where the only thing that is permanent is our soul and its journey up the mountain of consciousness toward oneness with all that is and with the creator of it all. What are your thoughts, brother?
Yeah, I think you're right on target. And what was occurring on my mind when you said the first thing is take a pause when things happen unexpectedly, right? The theme of what we're talking about here. I think the next step right after that, during your pause, is to practice self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And then right alongside self-compassion is unconditional love for others. You know, Al, you've been so brilliant of teaching me and others over the course of all these years about that. You know, we really, the world is a reflection of what we give to it. And oftentimes we're wanting unconditional love from others, but we don't give it to others. And so to me, it's pause, let that, you know, whether it's your soul, whether it's God's spirit, whatever it is, if you just get silent for a while, you'll hear it in your thinking, right? You'll hear it. And so then you can say, okay, well, maybe my initial reaction to that, where I wanted to be bitter or I wanted to blame somebody else, maybe that wasn't really the right way to look at this, because really what I'm doing is I'm being negative about myself, and I'm also being negative about others because I don't want to be negative about myself. It doesn't mean we don't take personal accountability for things that happen, right, that we may have caused, which I did. But that self-compassion and then the practice of unconditional love, I think that just eliminates the anxiety, the stress, and it starts to bring peace. And with peace comes freedom in my mind. And the greatest joy that I think I've experienced in this nearly 62 years now is those moments where peace has given me to this place where I feel like I truly understand what the meaning of freedom is. Because now I'm free to be to the world something I don't have to try to impress the world about. Because I think the most anxious times I've had and the least fulfilling are when I'm trying to impress somebody that I'm something that I'm really not. And So this pause you talked about, the self-compassion, the unconditional love, and I think it clears the path or the runway for your thinking to really lead you in a better way than if you're being reactive, because there's emotion tied to it, right?
Yeah, and you bring up a new notion as you're speaking about the responsibility of freedom. We talk a lot about freedom and how America's for freedom and we all want freedom. I think what most of us mean by that is we don't want constriction. We don't want a limitation. But what we don't often recognize is that with freedom, imagine a bird that's been in a cage. They're fed every day. And so this bird is essentially safe, but really just existing, not really living. Then the cage door opens and the bird can fly anywhere. And so now it's no longer constrained by the bars and by the cage, but it isn't guaranteed food every day without it finding it. And now it can fly anywhere, but there could be hawks ready to kill it. There could be all sorts of risks and dangers. And so freedom comes with a responsibility beyond no longer being imprisoned by the limitations of the known and your habits and your scripts and your circumstance. Freedom comes with the responsibility to actually have the boldness to test your wings and to fly. And that, yes, you will make mistakes and you will run into storms and you may hit a tree and you may go half a day without eating and you may get hungry. But that's really the price of freedom, is to accept the responsibility for now creating your own way. And the reason you and I do these podcasts is, as a couple of older dudes, is that we have been around long enough to see some patterns to life and to realize that maybe we have a chance to share some ideas that helps one person out there that happens to see this realize that, for example, you and I have a long background in the mortgage industry. And right now, everything's changed and the landscape's changed. And gosh, I've heard statistics anywhere from 30 to 60% of loan officers nationwide have now left, have checked out. Similar with real estate agents. And all those people are often in middle age or later, and they're trying to figure out, how am I going to support my family? What am I going to do now? It's too late to redefine myself and get a new career and all that. And yet, there's a freedom in that to say, well, maybe it gives me a chance to consider new ideas. You and I are on a podcast in part because 25 years ago, I got fired from a company I sold and felt like my life was over when it was actually just beginning. And by having the pause to try to kind of clean up things before I just evaporated in my self hatred, my lack of self compassion, I paused long enough to have a conversation with my wife, who suggested a new way of looking at it, that maybe this is that moment in your life when you have a chance for a new beginning. So for our friends in the mortgage space, for example, there'll be a tendency to try to hang on to what was. That's probably now eroded from underneath you, or to go run away and get a job driving an Uber or something to try to survive. I would suggest that there's another option, which is to pause and to eliminate the emotionality of your reaction and look at things objectively and remind yourself that there's always opportunities in any circumstances, including new circumstances you're not familiar with. And your first job is to get educated about what this new paradigm looks like and where might there be an advantage in this new paradigm having come about. Where might there be a lot less competition? Where might there be an opportunity to develop new referral sources beyond real estate agents, but including real estate agents, that have you finally do what you've heard for years you should do, you never did? Go call on divorce attorneys, go call on this, call on that. Maybe a new way of approaching your business, maybe a new company you need to go work for with a new circumstance. That's really what it's about. And it's really no different than those people setting out from St. Louis in the 1840s and 50s and 60s to cross Kansas and the Great Plains. And you're from Kansas, and I know driving at 80 miles an hour, it's scary just with the storms. I can't imagine going 20 miles a day walking out there in the middle of nowhere with no protection. Anyway, what were they thinking? Why did they do what they did? Why did they leave St. Louis to try to get to Oregon or California or Colorado or where they went? Because the possibility of a new beginning where they might be able to own land and they might be able to make a living farming or something that they couldn't in their old circumstance, had them decide to take the chance. So really, besides the pause, besides staying objective and not getting emotional in your reactions, allowing for the consideration of what God and life is offering you as new options and opportunities that you will be able to see if you look around for resources, seek out a guy like Stacy Harding to say, how'd you do it? And what should I be doing? And what does the hourglass do that might help me be able to get to it in terms of information and support? And I find that's another part, is seek out those people that are positive influences in helping remind you of the options of crossing Kansas and getting to Colorado and all the rest of it. Because whether you get there or not is actually not the point. The point is, and perhaps the whole point of life is, you have to keep adapting right up to the final moment, including the final adaptation into the next dimension beyond our physical existence. So as we draw our podcast to a close this morning, I want to close my part of it by acknowledging, Stacy, that while you've gone through a lot, I'm personally deeply honored that you decided to make that phone call and we decided to have some conversations and get to know each other. Had you have the courage to decide you're going to go create Hourglass and provide help for other people as well as other activities you're doing, and you're going to be a guy I remember on my deathbed as having been an example of the great courage of faith that it takes in moments where adaptation is required. And it's so difficult if people don't have the scope of soul that you clearly have. I honor you, my friend.
Thank you for that, Al. As you were describing that last little segment, I thought of something that I want to use as my own theme: be a pioneer. Think of all the great advancements in the history of the world. They're all done by pioneers. Even in
Wow.
this digital age, it was still pioneers that created it. And
Right.
so I was thinking about that. I could be a pioneer not only in my professional life, but in the personal areas of my life.
Mhm.
And to be a pioneer, you have to be willing to take risk. You have to have faith that it will work out, even if it doesn't turn out exactly like you think it's going to as you're traveling across the plains and the Rocky
Right.
Mountains to get to California. But you have faith that there's something that's worth it on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And the advancements of the history of our human lives and our world have all been created by pioneers, led by, I think, a creator that wants us to discover those things. So,
Yeah.
Al, this is awesome. Thank you. I love you. I love our times together. And I hope that people watching will just take a pause today in their own lives and just think about where they're at, what's troubling them. Kind of take a deep breath, let it out, and then start to think about how you can start to embrace adaptation and change, because it's inevitable. And if we can learn to do that well, we take away the temporary stress that we put on ourselves when we go through it, because we're going to go through it anyway. Why not do it without going through stress?
I think that's beautiful, and I would suggest to anyone watching this podcast, if you're going through something today that is testing your ability to be able to move forward, maybe you have been through something. Maybe you haven't yet, but you know something is coming, or you just trust and know that life being what it is, something is going to come. You're going to need help. You're going to need support. You're going to need a sounding board. You're going to need someone to hear you. You're going to need somebody to remind you of your larger purpose, your larger perspective, and your options. And I say to you, there's nobody better that you could contact than Stacy Harding at Hourglass Consulting when that moment comes to set up a discovery call. He's not going to twist your arm to spend any money with him. Although if you're smart, you will, because this is a guy that has been through the wars and has come out the other side and demonstrated that you don't have to go through it alone. And if you seek out Stacy in your moment of need, and he'll be very authentic and bear his heart with you, and he'll share with you what he's gone through and how he's dealt with it. And he's got wisdom, and he will help you get through it. So do yourself a favor and reach out to Stacy and just have a conversation, just to kind of, if nothing else, maybe it's one conversation and that's it. But to ever have the level of conversation you'll have with him may in itself be the beginning of you provoking a change, so that you can become a pioneer and discover what's possible beyond the seemingly safe confines of St. Louis, but is out there in the open space where your life can really come to full fruition, but only by taking the risk of change. Stacy, I'll let you close it out, brother.
Well, thanks for that, Al. And I'll just comment to anybody that might have interest in doing that. I am just an extension of Al and his organization and his wisdom. And so we're anything that you might engage me on will also be an engagement with Al. So either one of us, we're actually just here to help because it's part of our world journey. So don't not call us because you think it's going to cost you money or anything. Don't worry about that. We're here to help. So Al, this is awesome. Love doing this. You guys have a great rest of your day. And thanks for
Beautiful,
watching.
brother. Thank you.
Okay.
Blessings, my friend.
Same to you all.
Bye-bye.